The iron stoves in Ironwood, Dakota Territory glowed cherry red, but the rooms they were supposed to heat stayed brutally cold. This wasn't just another January cold snap. It was the kind of deep freeze that turned stacked wood into ash faster than anyone thought possible. The Lindgren family, who owned Ironwood's biggest store, burned a week's worth of wood in just 2 days. The Hendersons had 4 small children. They were already breaking up furniture to keep their fire going. Even Reverend Hoskins emptied the church woodshed, then started burning the pews, sure that God would understand. Everyone was freezing. Everyone was running out of fuel. They watched their cast-iron stoves devour everything they had, giving back heat that vanished the moment the fire died down. Everyone, that is, except for Antti Korhonen. The Finnish immigrant sat in his small cabin on the edge of the settlement. He wore shirt sleeves and read a book by lamplight, the same brutal cold that threatened his neighbors pressed against his walls. It found no way in. His stove, if you could even call it that, was not glowing. It was not roaring. The fire he had lit that morning had died down to coals hours ago, yet the massive stone structure in the middle of his cabin steadily radiated warmth. It felt like the fire still blazed inside. He had loaded it once that morning. He wouldn't need to load it again until evening. 12 hours of gentle heat from a single firing. Meanwhile, his neighbors fed their hungry iron beasts every 30 minutes. They still shivered in their beds. Antti Korhonen came to America in the spring of 1879. He was 27, unmarried, a stonemason's son from eastern Finland. Winters there lasted 8 months. Survival depended on knowledge passed down for 1,000 years. In Finland, people did not heat their homes with cast-iron boxes. These boxes ate wood like starving wolves. Instead, they used something different. They called it a peruni, or simply the stove in his village. This was a massive structure. It used stone or brick built around a firebox. A series of channels captured the heat. This heat then stored itself in tons of thermal mass. You burned a hot fire for an hour or 2. Then the stone itself became the heat source. It radiated warmth for 12, 15, even 20 hours, all from a single firing. The physics were simple. Cast iron conducts heat quickly. It gets hot fast. It radiates that heat into a room. It cools just as quickly when the fire dies. Stone is the opposite. It absorbs heat slowly. It stores that heat in its mass. It releases it gradually over many hours. A cast iron stove needed constant feeding. It needed it to maintain temperature. A stone stove needed one good fire, then it needed time for the stones to do their work. It offered 12 to 20 hours of steady warmth, all from a single loading. The settlers had laughed at his stove during construction. They called it a monument to foreign foolishness. A waste of good stone. They said it would never throw heat like proper American cast iron. Horace Wheeler, who owned the general store, watched Antti build. He considered himself the arbiter of sensible behavior in Ironwood. The Finn is building a castle for his stove, he observed. Someone should tell him that stoves come from the foundry, not the quarry. Antti worked slowly, methodically. While other settlers built quick wooden frames, he started not with walls, but with a foundation. He hauled granite 16 kilometers from an outcropping. He mixed mortar from lime. He burned himself. It took him 3 months to build. The finished stove was massive, 1.8 meters tall, 2.4 meters long, 1.2 meters wide. It dominated his single cabin room like a small monument. The firebox was lined with fire brick he had bought from a specialty supplier in Street Paul. This was one of his few concessions to American commerce. Inside, channels carried hot gases from the firebox through the stone mass. It was a pattern his father had perfected. Baffles forced the heat through as much stone as possible. By the time smoke left the chimney, it was barely warm. The stone had absorbed all its heat. That autumn, settlers visited. They were curious, but skeptical. Martha Wheeler touched the stone surface. "It is cold," she declared. "Your stove is cold, Mr. Korhonen. How is a cold stove supposed to heat anything?" Antti tried to explain. His English was limited. He spoke of gentle, constant warmth. Warmth that felt comfortable for humans, not fierce and fleeting. He convinced no one. The cold stove became a joke, a symbol of the Finn's foolishness, his refusal to accept the American cast iron way. The first winter came for ironwood, 1882 to 1883. It proved Auntie's design, though nobody really paid attention. He fired his stove twice a day, once in the morning, then again in the evening. He burned hot fires, the kind that would warp and crack a cast iron box. Then he closed the damper. The fire died down to coals. His cabin stayed warm for 12 hours, steady and constant, needing no more wood or fuss. He used perhaps 1/3 of the wood his neighbors burned. His home was never cold, never too hot. It was always comfortable. The stone released its stored heat slowly, perfectly matching the rate the cabin walls lost heat to the outside. It was elegant. It was efficient. And it was completely invisible to people who had already made up their minds. The next winters, 1883, 1884, and 1885 followed the same pattern. Auntie lived in quiet comfort. His neighbors struggled, burned more wood, and still shivered. The joke about the cold stove continued. It was repeated by people who had never spent a single night in his cabin. They never felt the gentle warmth that radiated from stone, which held hours of heat in its mass. If you find yourself drawn to stories about overlooked wisdom, subscribe. The real test for ironwood was still building, and it was going to be brutal. January of 1886 brought a cold unlike anything ironwood had ever known. Temperatures dropped to negative 40 degrees Celsius. They stayed there day after day without a break. The wind howled, pushing the effective temperature even lower. It was cold enough to kill livestock in minutes. Even inside their homes, humans were not safe. The cast iron stoves of ironwood fought hard. They glowed cherry red, burning through wood at an incredible pace. But the colder it got, the faster heat escaped through every wall, every window, every tiny crack. The stoves demanded more and more wood. The stockpiles dwindled. By the third day, families began rationing fuel. On the fifth day, they started burning furniture. By the seventh, the math was clear. There was not enough wood left in ironwood to keep every cast iron stove fed until the cold broke. The first death came on January 18th. Old Silas Ricks lived alone at the edge of the settlement. His stove went cold sometime in the night. His arthritic hands could no longer split kindling fast enough to keep the fire alive. They would not find him until spring, frozen in his chair, his wood box empty beside him. The crisis had arrived. But in his cabin, Auntie Corhonen remained warm. He burned his stove twice a day. He could have stayed in comfort. He could have let the people who mocked him face the consequences. But children were shivering in those cabins. They might die because their parents were too proud to learn from a foreigner. Auntie could not let that happen. Auntie walked into ironwood on the morning of January 19th. The cold felt like fire in his lungs with every breath. He went straight to the Wheeler store. All the town leaders were already there, trying to figure out what to do. "My cabin," Auntie said. His English was still thick, but clear enough after 7 years in America. "It is warm. The stove. My stone stove. It heats for 12 hours on one load. I have wood enough for the whole winter. Bring the families. Bring the children. There is room." Horace Wheeler just stared. This was the man who had laughed loudest at Auntie's stove. He had made jokes about cold stones for 4 winters. Now, this foolishness was their only hope. "Your stove," Wheeler said slowly. "The stone one. It actually works." "It has always worked," Auntie replied. "You never looked." The evacuation started that afternoon. 37 people crowded into Auntie's cabin over the next few days. Every family who could not keep warm in their own homes. Every person whose wood was gone. Every child whose parents finally put survival above pride. They brought what little fuel they had left, adding to Auntie's supply. They watched in amazement as he showed them the technology they had dismissed for so long. The stone stove took over the cabin. It had a huge presence, sending heat out from every side. Auntie lit it twice a day, letting it burn hot and fast for about an hour each time. Then, he would close the damper. The stone did the rest. The heat that came from it was gentle. It was steady, comfortable. Nothing like the harsh blast from cast iron stoves that would burn your skin if you got too close, leaving the far corners of a room freezing. On the second night, Martha Wheeler asked, her hand resting on the stone, "How is this possible?" The surface was warm, not hot. It felt like a sun-baked rock on a summer afternoon, not something dangerous. "The fire died hours ago. How is it still warm?" Auntie tried to explain it. His English was still a bit rough, but clear enough. "Stone remembers heat," he said. "Iron forgets. Iron gives heat fast, loses fast. Stone holds. Stone gives slow, all night, all day." He gestured at the massive structure. "One fire in morning, one fire in night. Stone does the work between. In Finland, we know this for 500 years. Maybe more. We have cold winters, too, our grandfathers learned. Not iron, stone. Stone is patient. Stone keeps you alive." The cold snap lasted 11 days. Auntie's cabin sheltered 37 people through it all. The stove used only 1/5 the fuel a cast iron one would have needed. Children slept warm against walls that radiated gentle heat. Elderly couples found comfort they had not felt in weeks. Families who had mocked the stone stove finally saw what they had missed. 4 people died in ironwood during those 11 days, all in homes heated by cast iron. 37 others survived, sheltered by stone. The cold finally broke in March. Survivors gathered at the Wheeler store, the only building large enough to face the winter that had nearly taken them all. They came to acknowledge what had happened, and the man who had made the difference. Horace Wheeler spoke first. The merchant who once led the mockery, who joked about cold stones for 4 winters, stood before his community. Shame covered his face. 4 years ago, he began, his voice shaky, I stood in this store and laughed at Auntie Korhonen's stove. I called it a monument to foreign foolishness. I said Americans knew better than Finnish peasants. He stopped, struggling for words. I made jokes. This whole settlement repeated them. Those jokes kept anyone from taking seriously a technology that could have saved lives. He paused, then continued. 4 people died this winter. 4 of our neighbors froze in homes heated by cast iron. The American way, the way I insisted, was superior. His gaze shifted to Auntie, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. 37 people survived because they sheltered with the Finn we mocked, warmed by the stone stove I said would never work. He looked back at his community. I was wrong. We were all wrong. People died because we were too proud to learn from someone who knew better than we did. Martha Wheeler spoke next, tears streaming down her face. I felt that stone, she confessed. I decided it could not work because it was not hot like cast iron. I never asked why. I never thought gentle warmth might be better than fierce heat that vanished when the fire died. She wrung her hands. I knew nothing, and I spoke as if I knew everything. Others followed, families who had found refuge in Auntie's cabin, parents whose children had slept warm against radiating stone walls, elderly couples who had found unexpected comfort. One by one, they spoke of their mockery, their pride, and the deaths that might have been prevented. Auntie walked to the center. His English was still accented, his words carefully chosen. But after 4 years of dismissal, he finally had an audience willing to hear. In Finland, he said, we have a saying, Q-usen. The stove keeps memory. He looked around. It means the stones remember the heat you give them. They hold it. They release it slowly. They keep you warm through the long nights. Cast iron has no memory, he continued. It gives what you give. It takes it back when you stop giving. Stone is different. Stone is patient. Stone works while you sleep, while you read, while you do other things. Stone does not demand all your attention every hour of every day. He paused again. I tried to tell you this. You did not listen because I am foreign, because my English is not good, because you believed Americans know better than Finns. Maybe sometimes Americans do know better, but not about cold. We have had cold for 1,000 years. We know cold like you know your own children. He gestured toward his cabin, visible through the store window. The stove is still there. It will last 100 years. Stone does not wear out like iron. I will teach anyone who wants to learn how to build such a stove. The knowledge is not secret. The techniques are not difficult. Anyone with stones and patience can have what I have. Then he looked at Horace Wheeler. You have lost 4 neighbors, but you can make sure no one else dies because they trusted iron instead of stone. That is the only thing I ask, that you learn and teach your children so the knowledge passes on. That summer, Ironwood transformed. 14 new stone stoves rose across the district. They were massive structures, built from granite and limestone, following Auntie's precise instructions. Each one took weeks to finish, but each one would last generations. They would radiate heat through winters that would devour any cast iron stove. Horace Wheeler built one in his own home. He tore out the cast iron stove that had nearly failed his family. In its place, he put stone. That stone would never fail again. He never made fun of foreign ways after that. He never just assumed American ways were better. He never again dismissed what he did not understand. The phrase building finish entered the language of the Dakota Territory. It spread across the northern plains. It meant building with heavy stone, trusting patience over quick heat. It meant understanding that old ways sometimes knew things the new ways had forgotten. People spoke it with quiet respect. It was as if they understood heat retention only after nearly freezing to death. Auntie Korhonen lived in his cabin for another 43 years. He passed away in the winter of 1929 at 77. He had married in 1890. His wife, Sina, was a widow whose first husband had died in that 1886 cold snap. He had trusted cast iron. Auntie and Sina raised 3 children. All of them learned to build stone stoves before they learned to read. The stove Auntie built in 1882 still stands. The Dakota Historical Society maintains it. It is a monument to a technology that saved a settlement. Visitors feel its gentle warmth. They understand how stone holds heat. They learn what a Finnish immigrant knew, something his community refused to believe. Above the firebox, an inscription is carved in Finnish and English. Ki muista. Stone remembers. The cast iron stoves of Ironwood, Dakota Territory once devoured wood at a rate that would exhaust every stockpile before February. They were replaced by stone stoves. These were built with patience, providing lasting warmth and memory. This ancient, patient technology, rooted in a deep understanding of nature, can outperform and outlast modern, resource-hungry solutions when true resilience is tested. The story of Ironwood and Auntie Korhonen goes beyond just stoves. It serves as a parable for our own time. We often prioritize speed and instant results. New technology gets chosen over methods that are proven, patient, and sustainable. We still build cast iron solutions today. They are quick fixes that consume resources rapidly. They offer immediate but fleeting results, and they often fail when things get hard. Think about our energy use, unsustainable farming, or supply chains that break down easily. The stone stove represents something different. It stands for resilience, sustainability, and a deep understanding of natural principles. It is about long-term thinking. It shows that thermal mass applies not just to heat, but to knowledge and culture too. The mockery of the cold stove shows how easily we dismiss wisdom, especially wisdom that does not fit our current ways of thinking. The challenge today is to recognize and value slow solutions. These solutions build real resilience. They might not offer instant returns. They might not fit modern expectations, but they work. Auntie's message was simple. Stone is patient. Stone works while you sleep, while you read, while you do other things. Stone does not demand all your attention every hour of every day. This applies to many areas. It works for building communities, caring for the environment, education, and even our personal well-being. It means investing in foundations that provide steady, lasting benefits. The lesson from Ironwood is clear. Sometimes the most advanced solutions are the ones that have stood the test of time. They do their work quietly, waiting for us to listen and learn. True building finish is not just about construction. It is about cultivating a mindset that values enduring wisdom over fleeting trends. Auntie Korhonen's journey represents a silent revolution. It transferred knowledge, not just technique. He brought a philosophy honed over centuries in Finland's boreal forests. This was about more than a better stove. It was a different way to live with the environment, with resources. The Finnish Peruni embodied this thinking. Survival through efficiency, patience as a virtue, wisdom passed down through generations. The American prairie had its own harsh winters. It became a crucible for this ancient technology, even though it resisted at first. The initial rejection showed the clash between local ways and imported wisdom. This happened even when that wisdom was crucial for survival. But the stone stove's success in Ironwood proved sound principles work anywhere, no matter where they came from. It shows the power of careful observation and smart adaptation. It proves utility always wins over prejudice. This quiet revolution, started by one man and his patient stone, changed how a community lived. It embedded a piece of Finnish foresight into the American landscape. Auntie Korhonen's arrival in America was more than just immigration. He brought a quiet revolution of knowledge. He carried a philosophy of living with extreme cold, forged over centuries in Finland's boreal forests. This was not just about building a better stove. It was about a different way to live with the land and its resources. The Finnish peruni, or stove, was the heart of this philosophy. It represented efficiency for survival, patience as a core virtue, and material knowledge passed down through generations. The American prairie, with its own brutal winters, became the perfect test for this ancient technology. The community's initial rejection showed the friction between established cultural norms and imported wisdom. This friction existed even when that wisdom was vital for survival. Yet the stone stove's success in ironwood proved the universal power of sound principles. It did not matter where they came from. It was a testament to careful observation, smart adaptation, and the eventual triumph of real usefulness over stubborn pride. This silent revolution, sparked by one man and his patient stone, changed how a community survived. It embedded a piece of Finnish foresight deep into the American landscape. Subscribe if this kind of overlooked wisdom fascinates you. There is more history hidden in plain sight. And, drop a comment. What ancient knowledge do you think we have forgotten that still holds powerful lessons for today?